Hi guys, after completing the first part of the chapter, valuation of goodwill, now I take the second half, the second part of the chapter, that is valuation of shares. I had told you on the very first day when we started this chapter, valuation of goodwill and shares, that there are going to be two parts and you can treat it that way, that this is as good as two chapters. Now, coming to the coming to the part valuation of shares. Now, you all know, you all are doing company accounts also. Shares is nothing but a part of capital, a part of owner's equity issued by the company, and shareholders like us, we invest our money in that company, and the company works on the finance provided by the owners, that is shareholders. So now what we are going to study is how to value the shares. See, every company comes out with an IPO, that is initial public offer. We call it as issue at the time of the start. Now you all know every share has a face value. Today if you invest in a company, say which has a face value of 10 rupees at the start, as and when the company keeps on progressing, they keep on doing their activities, the profitability changes, and according to the profitability, the share prices also goes up in the market. If you're progressing very well, you have very good profits, price double हो जाएगा, triple हो जाएगा, 4 times हो जाएगा, and in case you are going into losses, it may come down also. And if there is a moderate performance, then the share price will increase moderately. So what we are going to study here is, on a particular day, what should be the value of the share? That can be equity or preference, but because preference shares are not listed in the stock market, the main weightage is for equity also, equity only. Towards the midway of this part, we'll be taking sums also on valuation of preference shares, but initially the focus is only on equity shares. So what we are going to start is how to value equity shares. Again, like goodwill, as I mentioned earlier, in this there are three methods. The first method, there are three different names. We call it as intrinsic value method, another name net asset value method, and another name breakup value method. Intrinsic, net asset, or breakup value method. All three are same names of one method. Keep this in mind because in objectives they ask, and sometimes in the question, now majority sums में the name of the method is given intrinsic. So हमें आदत हो जाता है to solve intrinsic. Now they ask you in the question, calculate breakup value per share. You get confused because तुमको method का नाम नहीं पता. So it is that only. This is the first method. Second method, we call it as yield method, and the third method we call it as fair value method. First method, second yield value, and third fair. Fair is nothing but the average of first method and the second method. Suppose my answer of first method is 100. My answer of second method is 120. So my fair value becomes 100 plus 120 divided by 2. Okay. Now guys, in this session, I'll be just focusing on the first method, and I'll be doing two sums on the first method. The main purpose of doing the second sum is something different. What that second sum is and what is the concept, I will discuss with you all after completing the first method, first sum. Now guys, listen. Very important for objective also. The focus here is the meaning of intrinsic or net asset value or breakup value is the day when you are valuing the share. Let it be the day of balance sheet or any other day in between, or the day your company amalgamates or absorbs. What should be the value on that day, assuming that the company is liquidated? That means if I am doing this method, assumption is that आज कंपनी बंद हो रहा है, तो अगर assumption है कंपनी बंद नहीं हो रहा है, अगर कंपनी बंद हो रहा है तो हर एक शेयर होल्डर को क्या वैल्यू मिलेगा पर शेयर. assumption will be that the company liquidates today, it's wound up. So if the company gets wound up, अगर company बंद होता है, each shareholder, what value they get for their shareholding. It is an assumption. Company बंद नहीं हो रहा है. It is assumed that if the company closes today, what share value the shareholders will get for the shares. Suppose you have 1000 shares. आज तुम्हारी intrinsic value calculate करने के बाद, how to do we'll see in some time, it comes to 20 rupees. So on your 1000 shares, your market value is 20 rupees. Your market value should be 20 rupees. That is intrinsic value. I'll repeat again. This first method is calculated on the assumption that if the company liquidates, if the company gets wound up, on closing down, what will be the value per equity share? That is the concept. Now here there are two steps, and the first step is similar to what you all have done in the two methods of goodwill, super profit and capitalization of FMP, where we calculated capital employed. Similar calculation is there with a little bit of variation. So now what I'll do, I'll straight away start with the first sum, and after doing super profit and capitalization of FMP, you are going to find this very, very simple. And out of the entire chapter, this you can say from a student perspective, the easiest of the chapter. Okay, I'm solving two sums. Let me finish the first sum. Then the purpose of solving the second sum, what it is, I will tell you after I complete the first sum. And that is a very, very important part. Okay, let's see the sum. There's a balance sheet. Balance sheet of Kavya Ltd as on 31st March 25 is as follows. Equity share capital 10 each 50 lakhs. 10% preference share capital 10 lakhs. Capital reserve 4 lakhs. General reserve 3 lakhs. 8% debentures 5 lakhs. Creditors bills payable. Land and building, plant and machinery, furniture, fixtures. Goodwill, non-trade investment, trade investment. I have purposely kept both of them. Stock, debtors, cash at bank. Preliminary expenses, discount on issue of debentures. Additional information. On the above date, land and building is worth 50 lakhs, whereas plant and machinery and furniture to be depreciated by 10%. Keep this in mind. Goodwill to be considered at 5 lakhs, whereas both the investments are to be considered at 20% above book value. Calculate the intrinsic value per share. Calculate the intrinsic value per share. Okay, chalo. Now this is the A part, because B part mein I will take another sum. Now what I told you, there are two steps, and the first step will be calculation of net assets. Since you are valuing the share for equity shareholders, you will give the heading calculation of net assets for equity shareholders. Let me check the angle. Yeah, calculation of net assets for equity shareholders. As I told you, after calculating capital employed in goodwill part, you will find this very simple. Now इसमें करना क्या है? First let me write a heading. Now यहाँ पे you are calculating net assets. Net asset means the final assets which are available to the shareholders after deducting all assets, after deducting all liability from the total assets available. Now, याद है goodwill में, when we did goodwill, I told you, when you calculate capital employed, when we calculate capital employed, while taking assets, हम लोग क्या ignore करते हैं? What were the three things we used to ignore? Goodwill, because we are valuing goodwill, non-trade investments and fictitious. While calculating total assets for goodwill, we used to ignore goodwill itself if it is there in the balance sheet, non-trade investments and fictitious. Now यहाँ पे it is valuation of shares, goodwill part नहीं है ये, it is valuation of shares. So here when I take assets, total assets, I will take goodwill, I will take all the investments whether it is trade or non-trade. The only thing what I will ignore is fictitious assets. So keep in mind, when I calculate net assets, the first part is total assets. Your total assets will only exclude fictitious. Goodwill you will take. Non-trade investment you will take. If it was capital employed for goodwill, then we don't take goodwill and non-trade investment. But here you will take all the assets including non-trade investments, goodwill, but you will exclude only fictitious. So if you see, looking at the balance sheet what I have kept, first क्या, land and building you will take, plant and machinery you will take, furniture fittings you will take, goodwill you will take, both the investments you will take, stock you will take, debtors you will take, cash bank you will take. Preliminary is a fictitious asset, नहीं आएगा. Preliminary is a fictitious asset, नहीं आएगा. And discount on issue of debentures भी fictitious नहीं आएगा. So the last two will not come, the remaining all will come. And when you take the other assets, same concept of goodwill, if they give you revised value, you will take the revised value, otherwise you will take the book value. If they give you revised value, you will take the revised value, otherwise book value. Okay, so chalo, let's start. Particulars amount, give the heading total assets and brackets mein we will write excluding fictitious asset, or you can write here excluding preliminary expenses and discount on issue of debentures. Okay, so I'll repeat again. First, let's consider the asset side. You will take all the assets except for last two. जिधर भी revised value दिया है, revised value. चलो, let's take one by one. Land and building. कितना है? 35 lakhs. If revised value is not given, we take 35 lakhs. But देखो नीचे revised value दिया है. What the first adjustment says, land and building to be considered at 50 lakhs. Land and building to be considered at 50 lakhs. Plant and machinery. Plant and machinery. Balance sheet value 15 lakhs. देखो क्या बोला है? Plant and machinery and furniture. Plant and machinery and furniture you will deduct by 10%. जरूरत नहीं है, but I'll make a bracket. So क्वेश्चन का वैल्यू 15 लाख, उसमें से 10% माइनस करो. ओके, आई रिपीट, प्लांट एंड मशीनरी एंड फर्नीचर को 10% डेप्रिशिएट करना है, तो वैल्यू रिड्यूस बाय 10. 15 लाख का 10% इज 150, सो दिस बिकम्स 13,50,000. सो प्लांट एंड मशीनरी 13,50,000. ओके, नेक्स्ट फर्नीचर फिटिंग्स. अगेन प्लांट फर्नीचर दोनों को 10% माइनस करना. सो टेक फर्नीचर एंड फिटिंग्स, कितना है? 350. सो 3,50,000 माइनस 10%. 350 का 10% इज 35. So 350 minus 35, your furniture and fittings will be 3,15,000. Your furniture fittings will be 3,15,000. Goodwill. Now listen, if we were calculating capital employed for goodwill purpose, ये goodwill नहीं आता, but we are doing shares, so goodwill आएगा. Balance sheet का value 1 lakh. They have given you the revised value in the second adjustment 5 lakhs. So you will take goodwill 5 lakhs. अगर revised value नहीं होता, we would have taken the balance sheet का value, that is 1 lakh. Got it? Because you are calculating value of shares. तो शेयर का वैल्यू अप्रिशिएट होते जाएगा डिपेंडिंग अपॉन द market value of assets as well as the performance of the company. Okay, so goodwill 5 lakh. Now see the next two. Non-trade investment, trade investment. अगर goodwill होता, if we were calculating goodwill and we were calculating capital employed, I would have avoided non-trade investment, but this is shares, so I will take trade as well as non-trade. Now what the second adjustment says, it is to be considered at 20% above book value. So दोनों को 20% add करो. Okay, so non-trade investments कितना है? 5 लाख. 5 lakh plus 20%. 5 lakh का 20% is 1 lakh. 5 lakh plus 1 lakh, that is 6 lakhs. 5 lakh का 20% 1 lakh. So 5 lakh plus 1 lakh, that is 6 lakhs. And trade कितना है? 3 lakhs. So what I do? Trade investments 3 lakh है. So 3 lakh का 20%. 3 lakh का 20% gives you 60. So this becomes 3,60,000. So this becomes 3,60,000. Got it? So I'll repeat. Goodwill and non-trade both you will take. If we were calculating goodwill, ये दोनों नहीं आएगा. Now see, stock debtors, have they given you revised value? No. So if revised value not given, you will take the same value. So stock, same value 2,50,000. Debtors, same value 6,25,000. And cash and bank 1,50,000. Cash and bank 1,50,000. Last two, as I told you, preliminary expenses and discount on issue of debentures both will not come. Preliminary expenses and discount on debentures both will not come. Okay, anything else for the assets? No. Now before we take the liability side, let's take the total of all the assets. Okay, what we have written here, 50 lakh plus 1350 plus 350, 5 lakh, 6 lakh, 360, 620, 150. So 91 lakh 50,000. Okay, let me check once again. 50 lakh. $6 lakh. Yeah, 91 lakh 50,000. Now see how we did for capital employed while calculating goodwill. Assets में से we deduct external liabilities. We will do the same thing. यहाँ पे मेरे पास जगह कम है, so I'm just continuing here. Okay. Less external liabilities. Now see, what I told you, external liabilities क्या होता है? Liabilities payable to the outsider. Liability payable to the outsiders. So यहाँ पे क्या नहीं आता है? Share capital and reserves. Share capital and reserves don't come. So देखो, liability side देखो, equity share capital नहीं आएगा, preference share capital नहीं आएगा, यहाँ पे नहीं आएगा, but next step में आएगा, in the same step but at a later stage. Capital reserve, general reserve नहीं आएगा. 8% debentures. Yes, it is a liability payable to the outsider. Creditors, bills payable. So only last three will come. External liabilities will not include share capital and reserve. So only last three. Revised value nahi diya hai, so I take the same value. Let's take 8% debentures. That is 5 lakhs. Creditors, that is 1 lakh. And bills payable 50,000. So that gives you 6,50,000, which is the. Got it? This will continue further and यहाँ पे एक point आएगा, but I hope till now it is clear. Okay. Same thing we did for capital employed. Only thing is, while calculating goodwill, we ignored goodwill and non-trade. यहाँ पे we took both of them. What we ignored was fictitious asset. Okay. Now A minus B, 91 minus 6, 85. This is 85 lakh. Now guys, यहाँ पे थोड़ा ध्यान दो. As I told you, this is a very simple method, but यहाँ पे ध्यान दो. 85 lakhs. What we wrote against this while calculating goodwill? Capital employed. यहाँ पे we will not call it as capital employed. We will call it as net assets. Only net assets. हम क्या calculate कर रहे हैं? What are we calculating? We are calculating net assets for equity shareholders. We are calculating net assets for equity shareholders. So this will be net assets. वापस repeat कर रहा हूं. Understand the words what I am stretching on. Net assets for equity shareholders. This is net assets. Shareholders दो type के होते हैं. इक्विटी एंड प्रेफरेंस. शेयर होल्डर्स दो टाइप के होते हैं, इक्विटी एंड प्रेफरेंस. सो ये जो नेट एसेट्स है, दिस इज दोनों का मिला के. दिस इज फॉर इक्विटी एज वेल एज प्रेफरेंस शेयर होल्डर्स. तुम्हें पता है प्रेफरेंस शेयर होल्डर्स गेट अ फिक्स रेट ऑफ डिविडेंड. प्रेफरेंस शेयर होल्डर्स गेट अ फिक्स रेट ऑफ डिविडेंड. सो उनका मार्केट वैल्यू चेंज नहीं होता है. सो नाउ what are we doing? We are calculating for equity shareholders. So इसमें से जो पार्ट प्रेफरेंस शेयर होल्डर का है उसे माइनस कर दो. So what you will do is from this you will deduct the preference share capital which is there in the balance sheet. Maintain this step. अगर क्वेश्चन में प्रेफरेंस शेयर कैपिटल नहीं भी है ना, अगर क्वेश्चन में प्रेफरेंस शेयर कैपिटल नहीं भी है, यू राइट इट एंड पुट इट नील. बट यहां पे दिया है कितना है मेरा प्रेफरेंस शेयर कैपिटल? 10 लाख. रेट दिया है तो लेस 10% प्रेफरेंस शेयर कैपिटल. इवन इफ राइट ओनली प्रेफरेंस शेयर कैपिटल इज फाइन. कितना है? 10 lakhs. So now 85 minus 10 lakh gives you 75 lakhs. What is the heading? हम क्या calculate कर रहे हैं? We are calculating net assets for equity shareholders. So therefore the answer what you get will be net assets for equity shareholders. Will be net assets for equity shareholders. So I'll repeat. Take your total assets, take goodwill, take non-trade, just exclude fictitious assets. Take the total. Wherever revised value given, take the revised value, otherwise book value. Get your external liabilities. Take everything other than share capital and reserve. call it as B, get your net assets, which will be A minus B. From that, deduct preference share capital. This gives you your net assets for equity shareholders. ये आ गया, समझो 95% सम हो गया, because what we are finding out, intrinsic value per share. उसके लिए this is the first step. I hope it is clear. Okay, just let me check the angle of the mobile. So just shift the angle a bit. And now I will take the second step where we will get the main answer and you will give the heading calculation of intrinsic value per share. Calculation of intrinsic value per share. There is a formula attached to it. Very, very simple. Understand this. The formula is intrinsic value per share is equal to net assets for equity shareholders divided by number of equity shares. Net assets for equity shareholders divided by number of equity shares. Very straightforward. Net assets कितना है हमारे पास? 75 lakhs. So 75 lakh is my net assets. Now guys listen. Number of equity shares. Balance sheet में दिया है. You all know very well. Direct नहीं दिया. See the amount of share capital. कितना है मेरा share capital? 50 लाख. शेयर कैपिटल इज 50 lakhs. देखो इक्विटी शेयर कैपिटल के ब्रैकेट्स में क्या दिया? 10. दैट मींस एक शेयर 10 रुपए का है. द फेस वैल्यू इज 10. नाउ आई डोंट वांट द अमाउंट, आई वांट नंबर ऑफ शेयर्स. तो क्या करो, जो 50 लाख का इक्विटी शेयर कैपिटल है डिवाइडेड बाय 10 टू गेट द नंबर. सो 50 लाख का अमाउंट डिवाइड बाय 10. सो योर number of equity shares will be 5 lakhs. Number of equity shares will be 5 lakhs. So net assets for equity shareholders 75 lakhs divided by the number of equity shares, that is 5 lakhs. 5 lakh कैसे आया? Total share capital amount में 50 lakhs है. I don't want the amount, I want number of shares. So 50 lakhs को 10 से divide करो the face value, you get 5 lakhs, and basic calculation gives you rupees 15. Therefore, my intrinsic value per share is rupees 15. Therefore, my intrinsic value per share is rupees 50. इसका मतलब what I told you, if the company closes down, then at the time of closure, each shareholder, what value per share he will get? At the time of closure, what value per share he will get? That is the meaning of intrinsic value. Clear? तो यहां पे क्या हुआ, एक शेयर 10 रुपए का है, बट टुडे इफ द कंपनी क्लोजेस, हर एक शेयर होल्डर को 10 रुपए की जगह 15 रुपया मिलेगा, प्रोवाइडेड ही हैज टेकन इट फ्रॉम द कंपनी. अगर उसने मार्केट से खरीदा है, देन इट डिपेंड्स अपॉन व्हाट प्राइस ही हैज बॉट. बट दो शेयर होल्डर्स हु हैव डायरेक्टली टेकन फ्रॉम द कंपनी एट द टाइम ऑफ इश्यू 10 रुपया दिया है, उसका आज वैल्यू 15 रुपया है. दैट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ intrinsic value. Very important for theory as well as objective. I'll repeat again. Calculation of intrinsic value is on the assumption that if the company closes down today or if the company winds up today, what will be the value per share received by each shareholder? Got it, guys? So this was intrinsic value. Now guys, as I told you, I'm taking one more sum. Now see, वो मैं sum क्यों कर रहा हूँ? Same method only. हमने क्या किया? Total assets लिया, external liability, we got the net assets. Now something very interesting. Many students get confused. It is my favorite part. We will calculate the net assets for shareholder. Listen to what I'm trying to say. Don't get confused. सुनो, then next sum पे ध्यान दो. We will calculate the net assets for equity shareholders without having information for assets. सुनो ध्यान से. We will calculate the net assets for equity shareholders without having the information for assets. अभी ये कैसे करने का है? We will do it now. Got it? I'll just rub the board and I'll be back and understand the next sum very carefully. It is very, very simple. If you have followed this, simple है, but you just have to understand one concept. मैं क्या करूंगा? I'll just make a rough balance sheet and balance sheet में तुमको बताऊंगा क्या करना है अगर क्वेश्चन में एसेट्स का इंफॉर्मेशन नहीं दिया, because the next question what I'm doing in that there is no information for assets. अभी तुम लोग सोचो तब तक कि कैसे करेंगे. Okay, I'll just pause the video and I'll be back in a second. Okay guys, I'm taking the second sum, the extra question you all have, where if you see the question, assets are not given. Now before we read the question, I've just made a hypothetical balance sheet. I have not put any amounts, I've just kept the items. Now understand this. Now tell me, for calculating the net assets, अभी जो sum किया, what all we took? First asset side में, we took fixed assets, we took investments, trade या non-trade, we took current assets. Fictitious हमने नहीं लिया. I am circling and putting across जो नहीं लिया. Fictitious नहीं लिया. Okay? Asset side पे ये. Equity share capital, we didn't take. Preference share capital, we didn't take. बाद में deduct किया है, but ignore किया पहले. Okay? Reserves and surpluses, we didn't take. From the total of the assets, we deducted external liability, that is debentures and current liability. Got it guys? Clear with this? देखो, again I'll repeat. I've just put a hypothetical balance sheet. Assets, liabilities में I've just put the items. Amount नहीं डाला है. What we did right now for total assets, fixed assets plus investments plus current assets. Value छोड़ दो अभी. From that we deducted debentures and current liabilities. That gave us your net assets. उसके बाद we deducted preference share capital. Now see, balance sheet है, मतलब liability का जो भी total है, assets का भी वही total होना चाहिए. Now तुमको assets नहीं दिया है, but if assets are not given, they will give you the information of equity share capital, preference share capital, reserve, fictitious. तो अभी देखो, ये जो ticked है, what is ticked? We took. अभी ये पार्ट में क्या करना है? When you calculate intrinsic value without having info for assets, जो यहां पे नहीं लिया, जो अभी जो सम किया, जो नहीं लिया, अभी तुमको लेना है. That means other way around, if the total of these three minus these two is taken, then that same total has to be the total of these three minus fictitious. That means जो अभी नहीं लिया, ये जो अभी sum, what we did right now, जो खत्म हो गया sum, उसमें हमने assets minus external लिया है ना. Now हमारे पास तो assets का information ही नहीं है. So this minus this जो भी आंसर है, ये बैलेंस शीट है. That same answer has to be what we have not taken, जो मैंने सर्कल किया. In short, equity share capital plus preference plus reserve minus fictitious has to be equal to fixed assets plus investments plus current assets minus debentures minus current liability. So in short, जो अभी नहीं लिया, now you have to take other way around, because हमारे पास क्वेश्चन में शेयर कैपिटल का इंफॉर्मेशन ही नहीं है. हमारे पास क्वेश्चन में शेयर कैपिटल का इंफॉर्मेशन ही नहीं है. ओके, चलो नाउ लेट्स रीड द क्वेश्चन एंड वी विल सी हाउ टू सॉल्व इट. ओके, बहुत छोटा क्वेश्चन है. फ्रॉम द फॉलोइंग इंफॉर्मेशन कैलकुलेट इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू पर शेयर. इक्विटी शेयर कैपिटल ब्रैकेट्स में दिया है 100 ईच. 8% preference share capital, general reserve P&L, 8% debentures, preliminary expenses. Now see one more point. On the above date, assets are worth 10 lakh more than their book value. Calculate intrinsic value per share. Now what I told you, जो हमने इग्नोर किया था अभी लेना है. So I will take equity shares, preference shares, reserves. I will deduct fictitious. 1, 2, 3 माइनस दिस 4th. ये चारों हमने फर्स्ट सम में नहीं लिया था बिकॉज हमारे पास एसेट्स था. क्वेश्चन में देखो एक भी एसेट का इंफॉर्मेशन नहीं दिया. यस, दे हैव टोल्ड यू द वैल्यू इज मोर बाय 10 lakhs. उसके पहले लेट्स प्रेजेंट इट. सो व्हाट आई डू, गिव द हेडिंग कैलकुलेशन ऑफ नेट एसेट्स फॉर इक्विटी शेयर होल्डर. द फर्स्ट स्टेप, टेक शेयर कैपिटल बोथ इक्विटी एंड प्रेफरेंस. So write there equity share capital, that is 60 lakhs. Okay, 8% preference share capital, that is 20 lakhs. Okay, equity and preference. Reserves लो, general reserve P&L, general reserve 8 lakhs, profit and loss, that is 3 lakhs. Now guys listen, जानबूझ के purposely I have kept this item debentures. Can I say we took debentures while doing the first sum? So debenture is an external liability. यहाँ पे external liability नहीं लेना है. You just have to take internal liabilities, share capital and reserve and surpluses, and from that fictitious. So 8% debentures is purposely put to confuse you. वो नहीं आएगा because it is an external liability. External मतलब it becomes a part of borrowed funds and current liability. So debentures put across, it is just to confuse you. And preliminary expenses इसमें से deduct होगा. Okay, but before that, see the last para. On the above date, assets are worth 10 lakhs more than the book value. How we did in the previous sum? Assets का revised value दिया बराबर. There we ignored reserves. Now listen. You all have done SYJC में admission, retirement, death, correct? Revaluation account बनाते थे. Assets बढ़ेगा, we credit revaluation. Minus deduct करोगे, we debit revaluation. Same way see here. Just understand this concept. ये बैलेंस शीट है, जो भी टोटल है दोनों साइड सेम ही होगा. If I increase assets by say 5 lakh rupees, my liability also will increase by 5 lakhs. अभी ये सब में 10 lakhs है. बैलेंस शीट है, let it be any balance sheet. Liability asset दोनों का टोटल सेम होना चाहिए. So if I increase my fixed assets by 10 lakh, सामने my liability also has to increase by 10 lakh. And when I increase the value, it is revaluation, that is reserve. So reserves go up by 10 lakhs. So in short, if my fixed assets appreciate, reserve will go up. If my fixed assets depreciates, reserve will come down. Previous sum में उस करने का जरूरत नहीं पड़ा because assets was given. तो यहाँ पे देखो asset appreciate हो रहा है, तो what you will do is you will show it separately, appreciation of assets. Now which reserve they have put we don't know, so don't get into that also. In short, assets का value बढ़ रहा है तो मेरा net assets भी बढ़ेगा. So here you will add 10 lakhs. Getting it? So in this method, appreciation of assets add reduction in assets minus. Now what remains? Fictitious. So uske pehle let's take the total for better presentation. 80, 88, 91, 101, 60 and 20, 88, 91, 1 crore, 1 lakh. Okay. 1 crore, 1 lakh is my total, and from this, as I discussed, we will deduct fictitious. कितना है fictitious? 1 minute. 60 and 20, 80, 88 and 3, 91. Yeah, 101. From this, less fictitious assets, that is 1 lakh. So I get 1 crore. This 1 crore is nothing but my net assets. This 1 crore is my net assets. Now see, मैंने total लेके fictitious minus किया ना. Even if you don't do that, P&L के नीचे brackets में भी लिख दोगे less fictitious चलेगा, and this you add after that also भी चलेगा. I've just made it for better presentation. Okay, I'll repeat again. Fictitious यहाँ ऊपर भी minus करोगे, separate total लेने का जरूरत नहीं. Fictitious को brackets में डाल के straight away take the total, you get net assets. Clear guys? Now listen. वापस brush up कर देता हूँ. ये question में we don't have the information for assets, so you will take share capital, reserves, deduct fictitious, appreciation of assets you add, reduction in the value of assets you subtract. So that gives you net assets. Got it? अभी हम लोग क्या ढूंढ रहे? Net assets for equity shareholder. Now exactly same way, if I want net assets for equity shareholder, from this deduct your 8% preference share. Capital कितना है? 20 lakhs. So 1 crore minus 20 lakhs gives you 80 lakhs, and this 80 lakhs becomes my net assets for equity shareholders. This is your net assets for equity shareholders. Clear with this guys? Got it? So this was another way. बोर्ड एग्जाम्स में क्वेश्चंस फर्स्ट पार्ट का भी आया, जो मतलब जो फर्स्ट सम किया वैसा भी आया, एंड लाइक दैट आल्सो टेस्ट काउंट. Sometimes students get confused, but don't get confused. See the logic what I have explained you. Got it? So net assets for equity shareholder 80 lakhs. Clear with this guys? Got it? So we preference share capital तुम लोग सोचो, तुम लोग बोलोगे अगर डिडक्ट ही करना था तो ऐड क्यों किया? You can avoid. यहाँ पे नहीं लिखना है मत लिखो, बट अगर यहाँ पे नहीं लिखा तो यहाँ पे भी मत लिखना, बिकॉज व्हाट स्टूडेंट्स हैव दैट हैबिट ना, स्टूडेंट क्या हमारा भी हैबिट है, वी डिडक्ट प्रेफरेंस शेयर कैपिटल. सो इफ वी डोंट राइट देन व्हाट विल हैपन ना, यहाँ पे तुमने नहीं लिखा चलेगा, लेकिन देन बी केयरफुल, देन डोंट डिडक्ट हियर आल्सो, बिकॉज यू आर गिविंग अ नेगेटिव इफेक्ट. सो इट्स बेटर डू दिस वे, प्रेफरेंस शेयर कैपिटल पहले ले लो एंड बाद में उसको डिडक्ट करना. दैट इज द बेस्ट वे टू डू. Now I got this. Now I will get the intrinsic value. We know that second step. Calculation of intrinsic value per share. Calculation of intrinsic value per share. Intrinsic value per share is equal to net assets for equity shareholders divided by number of equity shares. Intrinsic value per share is equal to net assets for equity shareholders divided by number of equity shares. कितना है मेरा net assets 80 lakhs. Now same like the previous sum, देखो number of shares कितना है. देखो इक्विटी शेयर कैपिटल दिया है 60 lakhs, फेस वैल्यू 100 रुपया है, तो 60 lakhs divided by 100 gives you 60,000. प्रीवियस सम में 10 रुपया था. So in short, whatever is the share capital का amount which is 60 lakhs, उसको 100 से divide करो. 60,000 divide 80 lakhs by 60,000 gives you rupees 133.333. That is my intrinsic value per share. So therefore, my intrinsic value per share is 133.333. That means ये जो कंपनी है जिसका फेस वैल्यू ऑफ इक्विटी शेयर इज 100 रुपीज, टुडे इफ द कंपनी इज वाउंड अप, द शेयर होल्डर, ईच शेयर होल्डर विल गेट 133.33 पर शेयर. उसके पास जितने भी शेयर्स रहेंगे मल्टीप्लाई बाय दैट, दैट विल गिव यू योर intrinsic value per share. So that is the logic. Intrinsic value per share, the value of share assuming the company closes today. I hope the session was clear. I hope you all got the explanation starting ka, and you all got both the variation. This is an open video on YouTube. That is the reason you get a hang of both the ways how you can do first method. I have done 2 sums. That's it guys. Those who are studying the chapter with me will continue further, and uske baad, as far as open video on YouTube is concerned, I'll be recording a small sum where we will see the second method and the third method. As I told you, third method में कुछ भी नहीं है. It is the average of first two methods. याद रखना, to do the first method we need only balance sheet. To do the second method, I don't need balance sheet. I need profits and a little bit of information for share capital. कैसे करने का, that we will see later on. That's it guys. Please revise it. Open video है YouTube पे. Even those who are watching, those who are with me, app में I have kept more views. So जितनी बार share rewind forward करके देख लो. But get the concept clear before you start studying other sums of this particular part. That's it guys. Please do revise and take care.